hear me? Does this work?
No.
This works now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Eduardo Aguilera. I'm from Mexico and I'm working at the Coingaming group. Fun, fast, and fair. So I'm here to talk to you about Ecto and shitty third parties. Has anyone here used Ecto? Show me some hands, yeah? Has anyone here integrated some shitty third party? Of course. Every third party is shitty. And so I'm here to talk to you about how to combine both things to make your life easier as a service provider or just as a software developer. Right, but first let's talk about a bit about what is Ecto for those who don't know or haven't used it, right? Ecto is it's mostly used for databases, but in reality it's not the single purpose library, right? It's just it's divided in 4 main modules. You have the Ecto repo, which is the data store communication. It can be a database, it can be, I don't know, a file if you want. Then we have the Ecto schema, which is transforming data into Elixir structs. This data usually it's a table, but it can be a JSON. It can be anything that you want. Then we have the Ecto change set module, which is data validation. It makes sure that your data has the structure that you want, and it helps you to validate. And then we have Ecto query that if you have written a bit of software, you know that it's about retrieving information, right? Querying information. But for the focus of this talk, I will only talk to you about Ecto change sets, right? Because it's a very long topic to discuss in like 30 minutes. So change sets, and this is a piece I grabbed from the documentation that change sets provide a way for developers to filter and cast external parameters, blah, 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 a few text lines, but at the end it just validates data. That's pretty much it. And it looks a bit like this. I took this also from the documentation. Here we are just trying to create a user, right? This user has an age and an email. And we insert it into our database and it will return some error, very expressive. For example, here you can see that the age is invalid and that the name cannot be blank. So it looks like that. And I think it's pretty cool to have this kind of expressiveness on data. So what's the use case, right? You have your beautiful Elixir service that you wrote yourself. It's fault tolerant, it never goes down. But then you have this shitty service.net or .info, depending on your budget. And you as a developer, you usually don't have the choice of saying like, oh, you know what, I want to work with, I don't know, Amazon or Google. No, sometimes business wants something very specific that some random startup in India just created in 2 weeks, and you don't have a choice or a saying in this particular case. So what do? You do a good request, right? Because they have zero documentation, so they just have an API, and then you say, okay, I will play with it. I will say what it responds, and you just get a very, very sad success false, right? I'm pretty sure you have experienced this, and sometimes this is my day-to-day. I'm kidding. But it has happened at least once. But there is no feedback, right? Previously we saw a very expressive error from a library that tells you, you know what, the age should be above 18 or the email should have some format. But then here, what do? You wrote them in Skype and tell them, hey, what the heck should I send you? And then they send you a Slack message saying, oh, you know what, the age should be above 18. And it's like, oh, thank you for telling me. So yeah, that's my face after, and my color after receiving this, right? And it should be good if they return something like this. So this is how it looks like, regular Elixir code with the Ecto library. You have your schema, and this is with fields and types, right? It's just data representation in your code. But you have the problem that you don't have a table, right? You are talking with a third party. You are talking with it can be a HTTP service, for example. So you transform this in just a map with keys and values, a regular Elixir map. And the keys are your fields, and the values are your data types. And it's pretty cool because you can put any Ecto type. It can be a UUID. You can write your own Ecto type if you implement the behavior. This is just some kind of boilerplate code because this gives you a struct that you can manipulate. It has some magic with some macros. So here you need to define the fields that you want, which are the keys of your schema. You have to define your required fields. This is like a pattern we follow in our company, well, at least in our team. And then you define your own struct. So you have a Elixir struct. And then how it looks like? It's just very simple. This I haven't dived very deep into the Ecto source code, but it probably looks something like this. You have function. You have your params that comes from the client. Then you call a change set function, and then you see, okay, is my change set valid? Is my data valid? Then I can use it, or otherwise I just return an error. And it's very standard. If you have used Ecto before, it's very standard with some minor tweaks, like here. In the documentation, you can see that you just passed your struct, the schema map we defined before with your fields and your types. And yeah, here you are, the cast function just filters the fields that you permit, and then you validate which fields you actually need. And this is the magic, like what I find very pretty, that you don't need to call this external service to understand if your data is valid. You don't need to receive, the data doesn't need to even leave your service to understand if it's correctly or not. Because we live in a microservice world, right? So maybe you are just a microservice in your company that proxies some data from some other team and sends it to some third-party provider. So here we are validating that the age is correct, the car number has the correct length, etc. So it looks like magic, but not really. Like in the inside, you're just grabbing the data from a map and checking the length of the string, which I think is pretty cool. So this little piece of code will either tell you, you know what, your change set is, your data is not valid, and it will give you a very expressive struct where you have your changes and your errors, which originally they should come from a third party, right, from the external service, but you can do it by yourself, or just an OK tuple saying, you know what, you are good to go. The data is ready to leave your service, and you can make the call. So if you follow this kind of pattern into your projects, your code can look something like this, right? You can just have a run function that receives some params, and you can say, build my request, please. If everything is okay, just make, I don't know, HTTP call or send the information to the third party. If your build function says, oh, you know what, your data is invalid, or you have some nil fields, or the request doesn't have the necessary information that you need to send, it will just return you a very expressive error, and you haven't even talked with the third party. And just to aggregate, like, how, if I have an Elixir struct, how can I make this clean, and how can I, because you are here, you are not seeing any HTTP Poison or any Tesla or any HTTP client, for example. So one pattern that we use is this one. And instead of using directly the library, we import the behavior and we make the client ourselves, so we can separate our concerns and test them. For example, we can just test that our client makes the correct HTTP calls, and then we can test that our build function actually behaves the way we expected. And it looks pretty clean, I think. We just have a host. Then we have a path for every endpoint. We make a post request, and then we handle the response, right? Here, we like to use the URI struct just to make sure that everything is going well, that you don't have some random string in your configuration. Here, you can implement these callbacks that right before sending the post request, you will encode it in JSON. For example, in JSON, we do that. And then when you get the response back, you just decode it. So outside of your client module, you will only use Elixir structs or whatever information you need. You don't need to care about the format of it. You can all enclose it in this one module. And handle response, it's just, if it's a 200 code, if it's an OK response, you parse it, and then you see if it's actually success true, that it's what you need. That means that it's an OK request. If it's successful, which it might not happen because your data is already validated, unless the service is down because it's a shitty third party, then you here might handle it differently and make something more expressive. So just a little example of how it looks like. Right, so here I have my client, and I have a good request and a bad request. So here, I will make a good request, and I will just run my client, and everything went good. It returned an ID. It's okay. But then let's imagine that you will send a bad request, right? And instead of now returning instead of just seeing successfuls, you will have a more expressive error, something that you can actually manipulate and forward back, where you can see what your data actually is and what errors should be, and the errors of the data that you should have. And then this you can convert it into whatever struct or message or something readable for your business logic. And I don't know, it looks pretty beautiful because you had a shitty third party, but you just put some channel on it, and it's not that shitty anymore. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. Okay, so it was about changes. What about serverless? Like, what about repo? What about queries? Is it possible to adopt it all? To build like full adapter.
Yeah, you could, of course. It just takes time, and you have to question yourself. If it's a shitty third party, are you actually going to take the time to maintain your repo? or to actually maintain your adapter just for that one third party. It all depends on what your expectations of this integration is. But yeah, like in theory, you can do everything with Ecto. Ecto is not binded to databases. You can do everything related to data with it. So my answer is yes.
So you have admitted the need to duplicate the same type restrictions between schema and schema instruct with some helper macro, as we have seen. Do you distribute this macro with some library on GitHub or any other resource where we can get it at use? But because it's a little bit annoying to repeat some string, integer, and other restrictions between schema and struct. Is this macro of set of macros are shared to use in my project? That helper macro that you define struct with, and yes, this one, the next one. You have said yes. Is it shared?
This is just a constant, and here you're just like extracting the keys of your map. It's not a macro. It's just this is just a constant with the keys of your map, and this is a regular def struct.
As I remember, you should define types of the fields in struct itself.
No, not really. You can just have a list of atoms and then you have your struct. Like you can, but in this case, the types are here, which is just another constant, and the library Ecto chainset will use these types to validate against these values, and maybe you're talking about these functions.
No. This helper functions that only validate chainset. But as I remember, in previous versions of Ecto, I should repeat the same typings in definition of struct for my model. So the next question: what is the state of support in widely used databases by Ecto adapters like MS SQL, other than PostgreSQL that is widely used, Elixir and Phoenix?
Well, in the company we only use Postgres, but as far as I know, there are a lot of the adapters are well maintained. My MSQL was a bit updated, I think, 6 months ago, a year ago, but I think now it's pretty stable, except Mongo. But you only use Mongo when it's web scale. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have an updated info of the adapters, but I think they're very usable. A lot of people is using it.
Who is using Ecto with something with not the Postgres, which is not the Postgres? We have one Mongo user with Ecto. Once more.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo.